Hi, and welcome to AI for UX. This is the space where UX researchers and product leaders stay current with AI innovations. And I'm John Whalen, and I'm the founder of Brilliant Experience, and we're a psychology driven product innovation firm. So I've struggled to keep up with all the AI tools for research, and I'm guessing I'm not alone, and that's why I started this. In each installment, we speak with a founder of one of the latest AI enhanced research tools and dive into its inspiration and how it might benefit you. And just a quick note, these videos are not product endorsements. We pay full price at Brilliant for any technologies we use, and no one's getting paid. It's just to learn more together. So with that, let's get started. I'd like to introduce Eric Lee. So Eric is the co-founder of Versive, and it's an AI-powered user experience platform that helps companies conduct and analyze research faster. So thank you so much for agreeing to do this interview and talk with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, John.
Sure. Well, let's dive into Versive just a little bit. So maybe you can just tell me a little bit about who your target audience is for for Versive and sort of the pain points it addresses and how it helps with that.
Yeah, so we are built for UX researchers, for product and design teams, and research agencies who want to move faster with research without sacrificing depth. So we've sort of like we're solving a problem that I've experienced in my personal life. I used to be a designer and PM, but I was always someone who was a big believer in research. And we found that research is really slow. It can be really manual and expensive. It takes a lot of time to design a study, recruit participants, synthesize results into shareable insights. But on the flip side, when I've run unmoderated studies, they lack depth and it was still really time consuming to synthesize them. So what we essentially do is we help you conduct faster research with AI moderated studies that can ask dynamic follow-ups. They can record voice, video, or text. They can support usability tests. And we pair that with instant AI synthesis for both these studies and any moderated studies you want to upload to help you turn your results into shareable insights with themes, quotes, and takeaways.
Very cool. Yeah, and I found that tools like yours just I don't know. It's such a huge difference in terms of the scale we can do, the speed we can produce, and even just inclusivity across countries and languages. So maybe you can tell me there are some things that allow for interviews where it's moderated by AI. Well, what makes Versive a little different than some of the others?
Yeah, so I think a lot of tools will solve part of the problem. So they'll handle only usability tests, surveys, AI interviews, only analysis, but not all of it. But what we're trying to do is build an end-to-end research platform that supports multiple research methods in a single place. So our studies are very flexible. They support AI moderated interviews with dynamic follow-up questions that behave like a real conversation. They also allow you to combine that with more traditional structured questions like card sort questions, rating scales, usability tasks, as well as things like question logic. And you can also configure these studies however you want. So we support all types of multimodal responses, whether that's text, voice, video, screen recording. So you can collect really deep and um, fully featured responses versus just like a bunch of survey answers. And then, like you mentioned, yeah, these studies are global. So we have automatic translations, so you can turn your study into whatever languages you want to support. We have built-in recruiting, so you can use your own users or source millions of participants using our panel partnerships with panels like Respondent and Prolific around the world. And then we also have AI-powered analysis built in, so you can turn all of these results into instant reports with themes, supporting quotes, takeaways. And finally, we also very, very much believe in the value of researchers having human conversations and conducting moderated interviews. So we also support the ability for you to upload your own call recordings or transcripts, and we can help you synthesize those as well.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you for that. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is I was impressed with how comprehensive Versive is and all the things you're trying to do. Um, I guess one of the questions I had for you is just some folks have just never had a chance to work with AI moderation or these other sort of opportunities. So, how should someone think about working maybe differently with a tool like yours? And how, once they have it, how would they approach it? Like, how have you seen your clients sort of approach their work a little differently because they have these new powers?
Yeah, so I think there's sort of two levels to this. One is like, what does it enable? And then two is like, how do you actually work with it? And how can, like, is it this like big new scary thing, or is it something that's relatively easy to pick up? So I think on what it enables is, I think traditionally when you're trying to do qualitative research, you have like you can do a bunch of in-depth interviews with people. It takes a long time. Or you can run like a survey with maybe some open-ended questions, but you're not really sure if the quality is going to be good. I think this opens up a new possibility where you're able to conduct interview-like studies at scale and at the speed of a survey. So I think one of the things we've seen is we had a customer who wanted to interview hundreds of people across a
Mm-hmm.
bunch of different countries in Latin
Yeah.
America, and they're all Disney restaurant owners, right? So it's not something that you as a small team can do quickly or even do at all without having to like translate everything, hire a bunch of people to go and conduct these sessions in different time zones at weird hours. It's something that just wasn't possible before, but with Versive, you can sort of imagine new types of studies where you want to do these scaled qual interview studies. You want to get results overnight, and you can do that, and you can do it really easily. And so I think it enables a new type of study. I think the other type of thing that it enables that we're seeing our customers do is just they're able to do more research. So maybe like if you're part of a research team, you have like an endless backlog of stakeholders coming to
Yeah.
you
Mm-hmm.
asking, can I do this? Can I do this? Can I do this? And
Yep.
you only say yes to like, like the top 10%. And a lot of that 10% is probably stuff you don't want to be doing, but is something that people are like really, really pushing for. And I think the other thing that this changes when it comes to opportunity is it allows you to do a larger percent of the research you're being asked to do. And as a result, your company is able to make more customer driven decisions. And because these AI studies are really fast and we see a lot of people using them for like usability tests, something that like maybe you would have done as an interview before, but you could do quickly in an unmoderated way now that these studies are richer and more powerful, so that the research team can then spend more time planning and actually conducting the more strategic, higher value studies. So I think that's like the other
Mm-hmm.
thing on opportunity is it just allows you to do more high quality qualitative research that understands not just like what, but also why.
Yeah.
And
Great.
then,
Please go
oh,
ahead.
sorry. So just like on the other piece really quickly,
Sure.
I think when it comes to working with these tools, we've really built our tool to basically behave like a survey tool. So we'll go into a demo later, but if you look at the tool, it looks like a survey tool. You can add questions, you can configure a bunch of settings, you can preview what the interview looks like. You can send it out as a link to have people test it. So it's really familiar. But I think what's different is the AI moderation. You can sort of think of these as almost like items in a interview script. So rather than like the standard, okay, let me code a survey and it's really tedious and painful, it's more like you're writing instructions for another researcher on like, here's my topic, here's my question that I want to ask, here's all of the notes that I want to follow up on, and you can provide as much context as you want, guidance around like what topics to follow up on, whether you want examples and things like that. And the interviewer will just go and it'll understand what the person has said, it'll understand what the objective is, and it'll ask its own probing follow-up questions that sort of evolve with the conversation, just like if you were having a human conversation. So I think that's the main piece that's different in actually setting it up. But we found that the learning curve is actually not very steep, and people are doing some really creative things with it.
Yeah. No, that's very helpful. Thank you for being so thoughtful there. One of the things that you mentioned was just that the learning curve is lower, and I did wonder, do you feel like um, Versive is sort of geared to not just researchers, but other folks like product managers and designers and engineers, really, whoever might want to get into research that is well beyond the scope of what a research team can often cover.
Yeah, we are still, I think, primarily used by researchers,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we are very much geared towards building a tool that's powerful enough for research teams to use. But I think that's a really good question, John, because we have seen PMs and we have seen designers come to us and ask to use the tool. We've had people who are just like directors of customer success or like customer experience come and be like, "Oh, can I run a study on this?" And they just launch a study and it is successful. And then they're like, "Okay, let me pull in my research team and have them start using this." So yeah, we have seen a lot of cases where because it is more accessible, because it doesn't require you as like a PM or a designer to go and conduct an entire week of interviews, that it is a more usable format for those teams. So we're seeing a combination of, yeah, non-researchers and
Mm-hmm.
researchers using this tool, or researchers giving this to non-researchers to have them run some of their own studies, but maybe with a little bit of oversight on the study design and analysis.
Well, thanks for that. And Eric, I guess maybe now that we've talked a lot about Versive, maybe you can really show us. So I'll work on sharing your screen, and maybe you can just set the stage for kind of what the sort of process we're going to do here.
Yeah, so here we have an example of a study, and I will walk you through what it's like to build a simple usability study, what it looks like to the actual participant, and then what it looks like when you actually look at the results and the insights. So, as you see here, this should be pretty familiar if you've used any sort of like survey building tool. We have a study. This is just a usability test on a cooking site. You have your list of questions. We can edit each question, and then we have a preview. And you have the ability to add a bunch of different types of questions from usability tasks to card sort, rating scale, multiple choice questions. Uh, but also what we think is a little bit unique about Versive, which are these AI questions. So for these AI questions, you're able to think of these, like I mentioned earlier, as like an item in an interview script. You could ask a high level question. So in this study, we want to do both like task based and sort of understanding how people think. So here we're just asking a high level question. How do you decide what recipe to cook when you're looking at a site? And then you can provide notes to the interviewer. And this can be anything from a list of questions that you might want to follow up on to like sort of logic. If they say this, then say this, or just simply like make sure they explain their reasoning and why they chose this over other methods, which is what we're doing here. And then we have a lot of different settings that allow you to control the AI and the study and what the modalities it uses are. So here, you're able to set a question limit, so you can decide if you want it to be verbose or not. And then we have a bunch of settings for you to configure, like, is this a voice interview? Is this an interview, video interview? Do you want to record screen? Do you want to require a certain device type? So there's a lot of flexibility here. So this is what a participant sees when they get a link. This works on all device types. You can customize everything. And we also allow you to automatically translate this into a very long list of languages if you're doing global studies or working with mixed language audiences. So let's actually jump into the survey. So we are asking for screen recording. This is all done inside the browser, so the participant doesn't have to download anything. And it's also optional, so you can configure whether you want to allow it or not. So let's go through this study. We're showing a message here to just explain what we're doing. And with this prototype test, we are going to be doing both sort of like open-ended questions to understand how people are thinking, but also some task-based and closed-ended questions as well, because we just want to get a mix of what we think will be most useful for the study. So here we're asking, okay, how would you use this page to decide what recipe to cook? I can answer this by typing out an answer, or I can simply click record and it'll transcribe my answer. So I can say, I would probably just browse this page and see if there's like a carousel that has some interesting recipes in it, and maybe I would click that to explore more. So here we've transcribed the answer. I can edit it or I can submit it. So based on what I said earlier and based on what the question's objective is, it knows that I'm browsing. And it wants to know, okay, why am I browsing instead of searching, which is another viable option. So I'll answer this. I usually don't really have an idea or like a list of things I want to cook. I just want to see what inspires me and what looks tasty, and then I make my decision based on that. I will submit that. So it's sort of made the decision that I've answered the question, I've explained my reasoning, and it's moving on to the next question. With all these AI questions, you have the ability to sort of tune how verbose you want, how many types of follow-up questions you want to ask, so you can make it as persistent as you'd like. And they also stay well within guardrails, so it's not going to go off and ask questions that aren't related to the topic of your question or aren't based on your instructions. So we want to give you as a researcher a lot of control. So here is an example of, oh, sorry,
Oh,
go ahead, John.
yeah, Eric, can I just ask a quick question? There are a number of folks that have sort of specialized, so cooking's a good example, or we've worked with scientists or other people who have like financial specialties. Can you give your AI assistant essentially like expectations of, hey, you might hear these terms, or these are things I want you to think about in sort of follow-up so it would make sense to say a scientist or a financial expert?
Yeah. Yeah, so we do. So when you're building the study, we have two ways to do that, or three ways to do that, actually. We have some settings where you can just provide a bunch of context, and people have used this to provide definitions for technical terms, just general study objectives, and then also things that are off topic and not to
Mm-hmm.
ask about. And that is always given to the interviewer, and it's used as an instruction for all of the questions. You can also do it on a per question level. So you can provide as much context as you want for each question when you're building the researcher notes and the instructions. And that will be sort of like priority passed to the interviewer so it knows what types of questions to ask or what to expect from the user. So that's another way to do it. And then we also have a field specifically for transcription where you can pass in like proper names. So like if you have
Mm.
product names or you have proper names that you're using that aren't normal, it'll make sure to listen for those and transcribe those correctly because we've definitely seen that as a point of feedback in past interviews where, like ChatGPT is always uh, spelled in a different way. So we
Mm.
we allow you to control that as well.
Very cool. Well, here, I'll let you continue. Thank you so much.
Great. So here, this is a more traditional usability question. So we have a task, we have a prototype, and we just want to see, can somebody click on this tomato risotto recipe and figure out how to add the items in the recipe to an Instacart cart. So here I can click through. I see this button, so I'll just click that. So we also allow you to do these more traditional, like, I just want to see what you do kind of questions and task-based questions alongside the more open-ended AI questions. You can really attach these prototypes and images or videos to whatever question that you want to test concepts however you want. We really believe in making these studies as flexible and mixed method as possible. So here we'll move on, and here's just like a simple rating question. So um, let's just rate this a 5. Seems pretty straightforward. And then we can also build these studies in a way where it's not just a single prototype test. It can also ask a lot of other questions. If you want to sort of do some customer discovery while you're also doing this usability test, you can do that here. So here we're just asking an open-ended question about is there anything you would improve? So I can simply respond something like um, maybe having some other services other than Instacart to save my ingredients too. And it'll ask follow-up questions here because we added in the notes that we want to understand why they want these features. So here I can say, I don't always use Instacart. Sometimes I order my groceries on Amazon.
And Eric, just for the viewers, all these follow-up questions were not sort of pre-programmed by you. It's dynamically coming up with these. I guess I just want people to remember that. But
Yeah,
if I'm right,
yeah, that's right. Yeah, so
cool.
it's always dynamic. It's always based on what we talked about, the context. the instructions, and then also what the person has said. So just like an interviewer, it should adapt to what a person says. If they give a really good answer, maybe it doesn't have follow-ups. If they give a bad answer, it'll probably have follow-ups, or maybe we'll want to redirect you. So it really, yeah, takes in a lot of different inputs to make those decisions.
Interesting. Okay, great. I think you wanted to show something about results, if I'm right. So I'll leave you to it.
Yeah, so let's take a look. So when it comes to results, we do two main things. One is we believe in giving you all of the raw data because you're probably going to want to do your own analysis. So you'll get every single transcript, whether it's complete or incomplete. And then within the transcripts, you'll have essentially like an interview transcript where you can read through what the person said. You can play back any audio responses. You can play back the screen share to see what people said. You'll see the AI questions. You'll see information on like what flow they took, how long it took, and then answers to the structured questions as well. And then here you can also, if you did the study in different languages, you can translate everything into a single language. You can filter responses, and then you can also download all of this as a structured CSV that you can then plug into a statistical tool if you're asking a bunch of closed-ended questions and you want to graph things or analyze them. So we definitely want to give you all of the data. You also have the ability to share these transcripts. So if there's an interesting one, you can generate a public link, share it with your team, so you can start circulating knowledge even like while the study is going on. And then the other way you can do that is with these insights. So with insights, what we're doing is we're essentially giving you a report. And we like to think of this as like a first draft report based on the results of your study. You can refresh this as many times as you want. You can update it as results are coming in or when a study is done. And what we give you is a high-level executive summary. And then we're giving you an analysis of the answers for each question. So when it comes to an AI or open-ended question, we're essentially going through and we're identifying the recurring themes and we're describing those themes. We're going in and we're tagging the transcripts. And then we're also making this all auditable by showing you, okay, ingredient-based search is the top response. It came up 10 out of 15 times. And we're giving you every single quote where this came up. So you can sort of read through this, see, do I agree with it? And you can click into the individual quotes and read the transcripts to further audit things. So we want to make all of this very traceable because, as you know, AI can sometimes hallucinate. It's often a black box, but we think that there's ways to sort of build AI tools where everything is traceable, everything is editable, and it is more of a collaborator than just something that spits out an answer. So you'll have that for all of these open-ended questions, and then you also have more of the traditional metrics as well for any task-based questions. You'll be able to see here's a heat map of where people clicked on the page or tried to click on the page. And then you'll also have charts and tables for the other closed-ended questions. And all of this is filterable and searchable. So you can filter any of these results by closed-ended questions. So if I want to see people who only answered 5, I can filter. And it'll filter not only the charts and tables, but it'll also filter the qualitative answers and regenerate analysis. So you can sort of do this AI analysis on multiple cuts of the data, and you can sort of drill into the segments that you're most interested in. And then we also have an Ask AI feature. So this just allows you to ask questions about the study, and it'll give you custom answers based on the actual results with citations. So that's a high-level overview of what the results in this shareable report look like.
Very cool. And what you didn't see is me sort of nodding the whole way along that, like, these are kind of all of our wish list as researchers. And so anyway, it's very, very comprehensive. Very cool. I had a couple questions. So one was just thinking about it. You mentioned sort of seeing only the answers in this sort of segment. And I didn't know if there was an opportunity, for example, if we thought, yes, this half of the cohort is, has this property. So rather than being, say, male or female or a certain age or location, that I just sort of label them myself. And so anyway, let me just ask that. how have you seen people try to segment audiences here?
Yeah, so there's two ways that we've seen people do that. One is purely through the filters. So this is not probably not
Mm-hmm.
the best example because there's only one question here, but you can sort of like create combinations of filters
Mm-hmm.
where you want to see like, okay, people in North America who rate things like above a three, maybe they're like a segment. So you can use the
Yeah.
filters to create these segments and then basically create and export reports for each of these segments. And then the other thing you can do is you can go into the results and you can edit each of the interviews and add tags to them to segment them. So you can go back and you can add tags. Or for some people we've seen like they'll pre-tag people based on their user data and they'll pass that
Mm-hmm.
into the URL as what we call a
Oh.
hidden field.
Mm-hmm.
And this will just allow you to create segments without asking those questions and pass in information on users. Like this is like group one, this is group two,
Yeah.
or these are customers, these are non-customers, these people are enterprise versus SMB. So that's another way that we see people passing in sort of like segmentation that they can then use to filter the results.
Very cool. Honestly, I'm trying to rack my brain for anything else I would want. So it is very impressive that way. And we've certainly seen like sort of one study here. And I guess when you had your Ask Me Anything kind of AI, I guess I wondered
Yeah.
if I had like six studies in here, if it might be possible to look across them, or if it's really focused on a particular study at a time.
Yeah. Currently, everything is sort of focused on a particular study at a time. We definitely do want to eventually be a repository for all of your studies
Mm-hmm.
and give you the ability to build lots of different types of studies, which we do with these flexible formats, and then also upload interviews, which we also do. But
Mm-hmm.
then I think there's just more we want to support there. And then on top of that, yeah, we do want to build a searchable repository. It's on our roadmap, so something that we'll be working on later in the year.
Very cool. Well, also just so nice and clean, and so I could see how sort of handing this sort of thing to a stakeholder would be very cool. Um, is there? I think that's everything you wanted to show. Am I right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it's plenty. So here, let me just go back to just the two of us, and thank you for that. It was a very very clear flow. I did want to take a step back and ask a little bit about you. So, what you've built is pretty amazing, and it must require such like determination and sacrifice and everything else to go from zero to a product. And so, we're always curious as UX researchers, like, so what's the why behind that? So, what inspired you to create a product like this and for this field?
Yeah, so like I mentioned, I was a designer in a past life, but
Mm-hmm.
before that, I actually worked in finance and analytics. So I've always been like very data and research driven. So I think every time I go into a company, I always think about like how can we improve research? How can we um, how can I get as involved in research as possible? So well, when I worked at Uber, when I worked at a bunch of different startups of different sizes, I led a lot of research projects that were always really impactful, always really enriching. But I always felt there was a trade-off when doing these studies where um, we would conduct interviews and they would give really deep insights, but it would often take too long and we wouldn't be able to do that on all studies. And then I tried a ton of unmoderated tools out there, but always found that they were fast, but the results were shallow. It still took a lot of time to do the analysis. So this was just something that was a problem that was on my mind for many, many years, but I never really had a solution for it until I think like early 2023, end of 2022, when GPT 3.5 and GPT 4 came out. So my co-founder, David, is an engineer at Google. We talked a lot about different ideas. And when we started seeing these demos of AI simulating conversations or summarizing and analyzing text at scale,
Yeah.
that was sort of like our aha moment where just made us realize there's a lot of new things possible. And a lot of these new things apply to research and allow you to, we think, conduct and analyze interviews at scale,
Sure.
or at least make unmoderated studies a lot closer to interviews when it comes to quality, and you don't have to make as many of those trade-offs.
Yeah, so we've seen that firsthand, so I certainly agree. One of the things that when we did our studies of sort of, and this was January a year ago, so a little while ago now, but we found that for analysis, the AI in general, and I won't speak to your product, was
Yep.
sort of would actually give really good summaries of what happened. But it just really, I guess there wasn't even an opportunity maybe to inject it with here's our strategic goals and here's,
Yeah.
how we're most interested in looking at the data and sort of our lens. And I just wondered,
Yeah.
is that maybe you can just speak to that?
Yeah, so I think I definitely agree. And I also think we're like, even though there's a lot of tools out there and there's just a lot of progress being made, I still think we're in very early days of figuring
Sure.
out like what is the best way to do this analysis. And like we actually, even ourselves in our tool, we have a few different ways to do this. So like you said, like you saw with these like unmoderated studies, the way we do this is we sort of break it down by question. And then we also have like a multi-step process where we're taking the question, taking the objective that you provided about the interview, we're using that
Mm-hmm.
to then go through each transcript and tag the themes. And then we're going through and we're saying, okay, like how many of these transcripts, and sometimes there's hundreds, like support this theme and what are quotes. So we have like a process that sort of like structures that in a way
Yeah.
that you wouldn't get in like a chat GPT. But like you said, like sometimes the analysis is like done across multiple studies or it's done across multiple questions and the research questions are different from how you structure the questions. So
Sure.
that's actually something that we're going to be adding to these studies pretty soon. But we actually support it already when it comes to uploading your own interviews. So we're like constantly
Mm-hmm.
experimenting where when you upload your own interviews, because we don't have these questions, the way we set this up is you basically upload you create sections for each of your research questions. You describe what you're trying to understand, and then we look across the entire interviews to try to find things that support or don't support that question. And then we're doing the analysis that way. So it's a lot more custom. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that is something that we're going to be bringing to these unmoderated studies. And then we're going to be bringing some of the structure from the unmoderated studies to those studies. So it's actually not the question you're
Mm-hmm.
asking, but I think that when
Yep.
it comes to sort of like how we're building the product by sort of doing both unmoderated and non-moderated, it's allowing us to experiment and learn new things and sort of like cross-pollinate and figure out like what is the best way to analyze any sort of data. So I think TLDR is there's some things
Right.
we're trying, but it's still very early days and there's a lot more, I think, improvement that can be made.
Someone at a conference said that just remember that all of our AI is sort of the worst it will ever be, and so I think that's so imagine what it's like. And so, I did want to ask you too if there's anything it's your product's come a really long way, and you've got a lot of pieces to it that seem very strong. And so, is there anything or like milestones or achievements that you're particularly proud of that you managed to make happen with Versive?
Yeah. I think I don't know if there's any like particular milestones. I think like we still continue to think of it as a work in progress. I think we've been pretty excited to go from a company that didn't exist just over a year ago to starting to work with some companies that we admire, like IDEO and Udacity. So we're definitely proud of that, and I think we're continuing to bring on new customers where we're like, oh, we didn't think we'd be able to land these types of customers. So that's super exciting. But I think the bigger thing for us is that we're a small team, we're a new company, but I've just been really, really proud of how fast we've been able to build and execute and basically build something from the ground up in just over a year that I think is actually useful, not to just small companies or a certain type of company, but to a pretty wide range of companies. So I think I'm not really a milestone, but I'm just proud of
Yeah.
how far we've gotten. It's a lot further than where we thought we would have gotten at the start. When we set off, like we thought we would sort of build like very specific tools and maybe we'd expand that slowly. But I think we've just found that just like with how AI is accelerating what can be done with research, I think it also accelerates how fast companies can build, how fast they can iterate on products, and how
Yeah.
much product they can support with such a small team. So, yeah, I think that's probably the thing that we're most proud of is just how much we're shipping for customers, and how quickly we're moving there.
Very cool. And actually thinking a little bit more from your perspective, where this interview is all about AI for UX, I really encourage all of the watchers to try the user experience for all these IDE tools like Cursor and others, and how you can sort of co-think through code and make it and even learn from it. It's a really interesting interface. And so you reminded me of that, and it makes people like me dangerously a little bit of a coder. But I'll leave it to the professionals like you and your team. But I did want to, I think that speaks too to thinking about the future. So one of the things I wanted to ask is like, as really as your product evolves, and even just you have to imagine here's where the field will be in the future. And
Yeah.
sort of how things will change for people like me or researchers or product people and so on. So maybe I can just ask you both, how do you see this whole enterprise of doing research evolving over the next while? And I guess if there's anything that you wanted to mention about, I guess you already touched on a few things for how you see your product
Yeah.
evolving along with that. So really wherever you want to take that, please go ahead.
Yeah, I think I have maybe like three things. So one
Please.
is like research and how I see research evolving. Um, I think maybe this is like how I would like to see research evolve is like I think with all of these new tools and with the fact that it's like a lot easier for someone to not just like understand how to do research, but also be able to think about product strategy and think about design, and with AI sort of making it so that each person can do a lot more. I mean, I'd love to see research evolve to be um, a much more strategic role and one that is more focused on collaborating with engineering, with design, with product, or maybe sometimes like research is just part of the product role and it's more deeply embedded in not just like understanding, um, and then presenting something and then having the PMs be like, okay, let's take this or not, and then make some decisions, but rather having researchers actually making product recommendations, maybe writing the PRDs themselves, working with designers. Like I feel
Yep.
like there's going to be an sort of consolidation in a lot of these roles. Um, and I think oftentimes that will make things more efficient because I think researchers are really well positioned to be making these decisions because they're really close to the customers. They're really good at learning. I think if you can sort of be the voice of the customer and then turn that directly into a product decision, I think that's a lot more efficient than if you are like the voice of the customer, but then you end up having to just pass that to someone else and they make a product decision,
Yeah.
and then it's sort of a game of telephone. So I would love to see that. And I think that like maybe where Versive or AI tools fit in is that research is a lot of different pieces of research are very manual. And I think to do research well today, it has to be manual because if you want to understand truly like what customers are thinking and why they're thinking that way, you have to have conversations with them. You have to ask follow-up questions. You have to understand the why. And that means you have to schedule interviews. You have to conduct the interviews. You have to write scripts and iterate on those scripts. You have to do analysis of all of this um, very dense qualitative data. So I think like if we can build a tool that makes it so that it's research is able to work much faster, then I think hopefully that can eliminate some of the more like tedious and operational parts of the role so that researchers can focus more on strategy. They can focus more on recommendations and impact, and it becomes more of like a action oriented role, and one that I think gets the recognition it deserves from executive teams. Um, I think the second piece is like, okay, what does that mean for Versive, or how do I see people working in these tools? And I think for us, our goal is very much to be like a next generation all-in-one research platform. And I think really like that you mentioned Cursor because I think that's like a great example of it. I think to be this all-in-one tool, we have to do two things. One is we have to be able to support all research methods in one place. So not just AI moderated interviews, but usability tests, diary studies, better ways for you to record and conduct live interviews, and then sort of build that searchable repository. And then I also think that this full featured tool needs to be able to be used um, with or without AI. So it needs to be very powerful. It needs to be very granular. But I think the way I think people are going to use it is that um, they'll be able to do everything in the tool, but we think that researchers will then just actually be able to ask AI to use the tool for them. So that's like the other angle, like where we
Mhm.
want to design this tool so that it's not just usable by humans, but also usable by AI and optimized for that. So you might ask AI to help you design a study, to help you recruit participants, to help you synthesize the results into reports. But then you might step in and be like, okay, I'm going to take over here and I'm going to like make some changes and then I'll let you continue, or I'm going to just review your work and sign off. And I think that's sort of like what we want to evolve the tool into, like a fully featured platform where you can have human researchers working alongside basically like an infinitely scalable team of uh, like researchers that report to them so that they're able to work much faster and do more, not just for a certain type of study, but across all of the research methods that they're working on.
Very eloquent. Thank you. I wish I could have said that as well. So it's interesting. First of all, we had someone in one of our classes. We actually occasionally have some of the founders like you in some of the things we teach, and the person described it as maybe the researchers will become a little bit more of an orchestrator of research, and that's a lot. That sounded sort of resonated with the kind of description you gave there, and I think even with our own team, when we see us using these tools, I just looked at the hours that our team are putting in, and it used to be about 70% was collecting, scheduling, collecting the recordings, interviewing people, doing the just basic sort of note taking again, looking at the interviews they had made. And it's really flipped to doing very much strategic work. So, really looking at what were the ultimate goals of the research,
Hmm.
diving in and getting the right things that would be compelling, story for the leadership that we're working with. And so you are much more on the strategy side and much less, so almost calling it a researcher in some ways isn't quite right because it's much more of a strategic role. So I don't know. I very personally, I sympathize with your perspective, and it's an interesting change for us to think about. It certainly took me a long time to come to terms with that idea. Um, well, I know I have to stop at some point, so thank you so much. If people wanted to try Versive, can you just tell us how they might get started?
Yeah, so you can either visit our website and request a demo, or feel free to just send me a personal email at eric@getversive.com and I'll make sure to reply to you. Um, so yeah, excited to hear from people.
Very cool. Well, yes, you have come a long way in a year. I can tell you from seeing lots of different tools. So, very impressive, Eric, and thank you so much. Well, here, I'll just go ahead and close us, but I really, really appreciate your time. So, so thank you, Eric, for sharing Versive with us. And that's all for today. Thank you so much for watching and getting the latest on AI for UX research. And of course, subscribe and let us know in the comments anything you've seen about Versive and other things you might want us to feature next. And wishing you brilliant insights with AI.